The plate of roasted venison sat untouched before Willow Oakenshade as the harvest feast swelled around her, all noise and warmth and the scent of honeyed mead. And she could feel Karnath's eyes burning into the back of her head from 3 tables over where he sat with the other young orcs who had come down from the northern holdings for the celebration. She adjusted the cream linen of her dress, smoothing it over her knees beneath the table. Her friend Mara, a human woman with flour perpetually under her fingernails from working at the bakery, leaned close and whispered, "He has been staring at you for the past hour." "I know," Willow said quietly, her small tusks catching the lantern light as she spoke. She was petite for an orc woman, standing barely 5 feet and 3 inches, slender rather than muscular, with delicate features that her mother had always said came from her grandmother's side. Her green skin held an olive undertone that deepened along her cheekbones, and her dark hair had been braided with small autumn leaves woven through it for the occasion. She had dressed carefully tonight, hoped carefully, because Karnath had sent her a message 2 days ago asking if she would be attending the feast. "Maybe he wants to talk," Mara suggested, though her tone held doubt. "Maybe," Willow echoed, but her fingers twisted together in her lap. They had courted for nearly 8 months before the summer ended. Karnath was traditional, proud of his orc heritage, strong and handsome in the way that turned heads when he walked through the settlement. He had grown increasingly uncomfortable with how easily Willow moved between the human and orc communities in Greystone Crossing, how she worked at the lending library that served everyone regardless of species, how she laughed at human jokes and attended human celebrations. The arguments had grown sharper, his criticism more pointed, until finally she had told him she could not change who she was, and he had said perhaps that was the problem. That had been 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of catching glimpses of him at the market, of hearing through mutual friends that he regretted how things ended, of the message that had arrived asking if she would be at the harvest feast with enough formality that it could have meant anything or nothing. The musicians struck up a new tune, something bright and quick that had people pushing back from the tables. The feast hall was the largest building in Greystone Crossing, built from timber and stone with high rafters strung with paper lanterns that cast golden light over the assembly. Humans and orcs mingled here more freely than in many border settlements, drawn together by good soil and the practical necessities of frontier life, though there were still separate tables, still careful distances maintained by some. Willow felt Karnath approaching before she saw him. The crowd seemed to part slightly, conversations dipping in volume. He was tall, nearly 6.5 feet, with the dark green skin and prominent tusks that spoke of pure northern bloodlines. He wore traditional clothing, the wrapped leather and wool that orcs favored, and his expression was set in careful neutrality as he stopped beside her table. "Willow," he said, his voice carrying despite the music. "May I speak with you?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. Mara's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once, then released. Willow stood, smoothing her dress again, and nodded. Of course. She expected him to lead her outside or to a quieter corner. Instead, he stayed where he was, standing in the space between tables where dancers were beginning to gather. People were watching now, openly curious. Willow's throat tightened. "I have thought much about what happened between us," Karnath said, and his voice was formal, the tone he used when speaking to elders or in matters of importance. "I have considered whether I was too harsh, whether I expected too much." Hope flickered in her chest, fragile and tentative. She waited. "I have concluded," he continued, his gaze steady on her face, "that I was not wrong in my concerns. You have lost yourself among the humans, Willow. You dress as they do, speak as they do, spend your days surrounded by their books and their ideas. I thought perhaps you might have used this time to reflect, to remember what it means to be orc, but I see you have not." The hope guttered and died. Willow stared at him, unable to form words. The conversations around them had stopped entirely now. The music continued, but no one was dancing. "I cannot build a future with someone who is ashamed of her own people," Karnath said, and there was something almost pitying in his expression that made her skin burn. "I thought you should know that clearly, so you do not continue to wait for something that will not happen. I am sorry if I gave you false expectations by asking if you would be here tonight. I simply wanted to be certain of my decision, and now I am." He inclined his head, a gesture of formal dismissal, and turned to walk back to his table. Willow stood frozen in the sudden silence. Her face felt hot, her hands cold. She could feel every eye in the hall on her, could hear the whispers starting like wind through dry grass. Mara was saying something, reaching for her arm, but the words seemed to come from very far away. The musicians had stopped playing. Someone coughed. A bench scraped against the floor. She should sit down. She should leave. She should do anything except stand here like a fool in her carefully chosen dress with autumn leaves in her hair while the man she had loved told the entire settlement that she was not orc enough, not good enough, not worth his time. Then a different bench scraped, louder, more deliberate. Footsteps crossed the floor. "Excuse me," a warm voice said. "I believe they are about to start the next dance, and I find myself without a partner." Willow turned, her thoughts still scattered, and looked up into the face of Garrett Brennan. She knew him, of course. Everyone in Greystone Crossing knew Garrett Brennan. He had arrived 3 years ago with a wagon full of carpentry tools and enough charm to make friends before he had finished building his own house. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet exactly, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. His hair was dark brown, perpetually slightly too long, and his eyes were a clear gray that seemed to catch light like river stones. He smiled easily and often, helped his neighbors without being asked, and had built half the new structures in the settlement, including the extension on the library where Willow worked. He was looking at her now with those gray eyes, his hand extended, his expression warm and completely free of pity. "I am not certain the musicians are playing," Willow managed to say, and was horrified by how small her voice sounded. "Then we will simply have to persuade them," Garrett said. He glanced toward the corner where the musicians sat with their instruments quiet in their laps, raised his voice slightly. "Something with a good rhythm, if you would. The lady has agreed to dance with me." It was not precisely true. She had not agreed to anything. But the fiddler, an older human man named Thomas, who had taught Willow to play checkers when she first came to work at the library, caught Garrett's eye and grinned. He lifted his instrument, nodded to the others, and struck up a tune that was halfway between a reel and a waltz, something that could be danced to in several styles. Garrett's hand was still extended. The hall was still watching. But the quality of the attention had shifted somehow, no longer pitying, now simply curious. Willow placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and he led her to the center of the floor. She had danced before at other celebrations, though never with a human partner. Garrett seemed entirely unbothered by any potential difference. He placed one hand at her waist, kept the other holding hers, and waited for her to set the pace. "I do not know this style very well," she admitted quietly. "Neither do I," he said cheerfully. "We shall muddle through together. Step back when I step forward, and if I tread on your feet, you have permission to tread on mine in retaliation." Despite everything, despite the humiliation still burning in her chest and the awareness of Karnath watching from his table, Willow felt her lips twitch toward a smile. They began to move. Garrett was not a particularly graceful dancer, but he was confident enough that it mattered less than it might have. He guided her through the basic steps, murmuring counts under his breath until they found a rhythm that worked. Other couples began to join them on the floor, the usual dancers who never missed a chance at a reel, and the terrible weight of being the center of attention began to ease. "Thank you," Willow said after they had completed a full circuit of the floor. "You did not have to do that." "I know," Garrett said. His expression was serious now, though still kind. "I did not do it because I had to. I did it because I wanted to dance with you, and that seemed like an excellent opportunity." She studied his face, searching for signs of deception or charity. "You wanted to dance with me?" "Yes." "Why?" He turned her under his arm, smooth enough that she suspected he was a better dancer than he had claimed. "Because I think you are interesting and lovely, and I have been trying to work up the courage to speak with you properly for approximately 6 months, and when I saw you standing there I thought that if I did not take the chance, I was a coward and a fool." Willow nearly stumbled. Garrett steadied her, his hand firm at her waist. 6 months, she repeated. "Give or take. There was a day last spring when you helped me select books for my sister's children. You spent nearly an hour discussing which stories were appropriate for which ages, and you did this thing where you tucked your hair behind your ear while you thought. I found it absolutely captivating and have been somewhat foolishly enamored ever since." The music swirled around them. Willow's thoughts swirled with it. "I was courting Karnath last spring. I know. Why do you think I never said anything?" Garrett's smile turned slightly rueful. "I am many things, but I try not to be dishonorable. You were spoken for. I kept my distance and told myself I would forget about it." "But you did not." "No," he admitted. "I did not. Every time you smiled at someone in the library or laughed at something or concentrated on organizing the new acquisitions with that little furrow between your brows, I thought about it. And then I heard that you and he had parted ways, and I thought perhaps I might have a chance, but you seemed sad and I did not want to intrude on that. I decided I would wait until you seemed happier, until enough time had passed. And then tonight happened, and I thought waiting was a damned stupid idea when I could simply ask you to dance instead." The song was ending, the fiddle winding down to its final notes. Other dancers were separating, applauding the musicians, returning to their tables. Willow and Garrett stood still in the middle of the floor. "That was one dance," she said carefully. "You have asked me for one dance." "I have," Garrett agreed. "Would you like another? Or if you would prefer, we could walk outside for some air, or I could get you a drink. Or we could go back to your table and I could sit there and make awkward conversation with your friends until you decide whether you can tolerate my company. I am flexible." Despite herself, despite everything, Willow laughed. It came out shaky but genuine, and the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "I think I would like some air." "Excellent choice," Garrett said. He offered his arm with exaggerated formality. "Shall we?" She took it, and they walked together toward the wide doors that stood open to the autumn night. Behind them, conversation resumed in the feast hall, louder now, animated. Willow did not look back to see if Karnath was watching. She focused instead on the feeling of Garrett's arm beneath her hand, solid and real, and the cool air that washed over her face as they stepped outside. The night was clear, stars scattered thick across the sky. Lanterns hung from poles around the feast hall's exterior, casting pools of golden light across the hard, packed earth. A few other people stood in small groups, talking and laughing, their breath misting slightly in the autumn chill. Garrett led her away from the crowds, toward the edge of the area where the light faded and the darkness of the surrounding fields began. He did not speak immediately, seemed content to simply walk beside her, and Willow found herself grateful for the silence. "Are you well?" he asked eventually, his voice quiet. "I am not certain," Willow admitted. "I feel humiliated and angry and confused and also strangely relieved, and I do not know what to do with all of that at once." "That seems like a reasonable collection of feelings given the circumstances." She glanced up at him. His profile was thoughtful in the dim light. "You are being very kind to me. I hope I am always kind, though I will confess to being particularly motivated in this instance. Because you have been foolishly enamored for 6 months. Precisely." He smiled down at her. "Though I begin to suspect it may have been longer. There was an incident with an overdue book fine last autumn that I recall with embarrassing clarity." Despite everything, Willow found herself smiling again. "You are trying to distract me. Is it working?" "Somewhat." They reached a fence that marked the boundary of the feast grounds, split rail and weathered. Garrett leaned against it, and after a moment Willow did the same. The fields beyond were dark, the harvested grain reduced to stubble, but she could smell the earth and growing things, the particular scent of autumn in the border country. "May I ask you something?" Garrett said. "Yes." "Do you think he was right, what he said about you and your heritage?" Willow was quiet for a long moment. It was the question that had been eating at her for weeks, if she was honest. The question Karnath had wielded like a blade. "I do not know. I love the Orc traditions I was raised with. I love the stories my mother told me, the songs, the way we mark the seasons. But I also love human music and human books, and the way humans argue about ideas just for the joy of arguing. I do not see why I must choose one and abandon the other." "I do not think you should have to," Garrett said firmly. "The best things about living in a place like Greystone Crossing are that we learn from each other. We build something new together that is better than what we had separately. Anyone who cannot see that is willfully blind. Karnath would say I am abandoning my people by thinking that way." "Karnath," Garrett said with careful precision, "is entitled to his opinion, but that does not make him correct. And frankly, publicly humiliating someone he claimed to care about suggests his judgment is not particularly sound regardless." Willow turned to look at him properly. "You are angry on my behalf." "Yes," Garrett said simply. "I am. What he did was cruel and unnecessary. If he wished to make his feelings clear, he could have spoken to you privately. Instead, he chose to make a spectacle of rejecting you in front of the entire settlement. That speaks poorly of his character, not yours." Something warm unfurled in Willow's chest, easing the tight knot of shame that had been sitting there. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it." Garrett's expression was serious now, intent. "Willow, I know we do not know each other well yet, but I would like to. Not because I pity you, and not because I am trying to prove some point about humans and orcs getting along. I would like to know you, because I find you fascinating, and I think you are remarkable, and I would very much like the chance to see if you might come to like me even half as much as I like you." Her breath caught. The directness of it was almost overwhelming, so different from Karnath's elaborate courtship rules and formal speeches. "You barely know me. Then let me remedy that. Have dinner with me. Come see the house I am building on the eastern edge of town. Meet my terrible hound who has no manners and too much energy. Talk to me about books and music and whatever else you care about. Give me a chance to know you properly and let yourself know me." "What if people talk?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Garrett's smile turned wry. "People will talk regardless. They are already talking about the fact that I asked you to dance. We can give them something worth discussing, or we can let them invent their own stories. I know which I would prefer." Willow looked out across the dark fields, thinking. Her heart was still bruised from Karnath's rejection, still tender. But beneath that was something else, something that had been growing quietly for months without her fully acknowledging it. The way her attention had always sharpened when Garrett came into the library. The way she had noticed his smile, his hands, the patient way he explained carpentry to curious children. The way she had felt a peculiar disappointment when she realized he never lingered to talk to her the way he did with others, never seemed to seek her out. She had thought it was because he did not like orcs. Now she knew it was because he liked her too much and had been trying to be honorable about it. "One dinner," she said carefully, "and meeting your terrible hound, and we will see what happens from there." The smile that broke across Garrett's face was like sunrise. "That is all I ask. Well, that and perhaps another dance before the night is over if you are willing." "I think I might be," Willow said, and found that she meant it. They walked back toward the feast hall together, slower than they had left. The music was loud again, cheerful, and through the open doors Willow could see people dancing and eating and talking. It looked warm and welcoming, and the dread she had felt about returning was gone. Garrett paused at the threshold. "I should probably return to my table before my friends assume I have been spirited away by fairies, but I meant what I said, about all of it." "I know," Willow said, and somehow she did. He squeezed her hand once, gentle, then released it and headed back to where a group of men were sitting and very obviously trying not to stare. Willow returned to Mara, who immediately grabbed her arm and pulled her down onto the bench. "Tell me everything," Mara demanded. "What did he say?" "What did you say? Are you well? Do I need to poison Karnath's mead?" "I am well," Willow said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "And no poisoning is necessary, though I appreciate the offer." "Garrett Brennan," Mara said, shaking her head in wonder. "I did not see that coming." "Neither did I. But you are pleased?" Willow considered the question honestly. She was bruised and confused and still processing the humiliation of what Karnath had done. But beneath all of that was a flutter of something that might have been excitement, might have been hope. "I think I might be," she said. "Ask me again in a few days." Mara grinned and poured her a cup of mead. "To new beginnings, then." "To new beginnings," Willow echoed and drank. The feast continued around them, and if people stared or whispered, Willow found she cared less than she had expected. She ate her venison, laughed at Mara's stories, and when Garrett appeared an hour later to claim the second dance he had requested, she took his hand without hesitation. This time, she knew the steps better. This time, when he smiled down at her, she smiled back. And when the dance ended and he asked if he might walk her home later, she said yes. The next 3 days passed in a peculiar haze of normal routine layered over with new awareness. Willow went to work at the library as usual, cataloging new acquisitions and helping patrons find what they needed. But now when Garrett stopped by to return a book or ask a question about building codes, she was aware of the way his eyes found hers, the slight smile that played at the corner of his mouth, the way he seemed to find excuses to linger. On the 4th day after the feast, he appeared at the library just before closing time with a bouquet of late-season wildflowers that were slightly crushed from being carried in his coat pocket. "I thought you might like these," he said, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Though I realize now that bringing flowers to a library is perhaps not the most practical gesture." Willow took them, touched by the attempt. "I have a vase in the back room. They will be perfect there." "Good. Excellent." He cleared his throat. "I also came to ask if you would join me for dinner tomorrow evening. I cannot promise sophisticated cuisine, but I make a decent stew and my hound is very eager to meet you. He has been insufferable about it, actually. I may have mentioned you once or twice." She found herself laughing at the image. "Only once or twice? Perhaps more often than that," Garrett admitted, his smile turning sheepish. "He is a good listener, or at least he pretends to be when there is a chance of getting scraps." I would like that, Willow said. Dinner and meeting your hound. What time should I arrive? They arranged the details, and Garrett left looking pleased with himself. Willow put the flowers in water and tried not to feel quite so much like a girl planning her first courtship, but it was difficult. There was something easy about being with Garrett, something that made her want to smile for no particular reason. Mara noticed, of course. "You are glowing," she announced the next morning when Willow arrived at the bakery to buy bread for dinner. "It is disgusting and wonderful, and I am deeply envious." "I am not glowing. I am simply in a good mood." "You are glowing," Mara insisted. "And you should be. Garrett Brennan is a good man, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. Enjoy it." Willow tried to protest further, but Mara was already packaging up a loaf of fresh wheat bread and refusing to accept payment. "Consider it a gift to support your courtship. Now go home and make yourself pretty. Not that you need much help, but indulge yourself." So Willow did. She washed her hair and braided it simply, leaving it to fall down her back. She chose a dress in deep blue that Mara had helped her make last summer, one that fit well and made her feel confident. She debated jewelry and settled on simple silver earrings that her mother had given her. Garrett's house was on the eastern edge of Greystone Crossing, set back from the main road with a vegetable garden on one side and a workshop on the other. It was well built, as she would have expected, with clean lines and a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. Smoke rose from the chimney and she could smell something savory cooking. Before she could knock, the door swung open and a massive tan hound bounded out, barking enthusiastically. Garrett appeared behind it, grabbing for the dog's collar and missing. "Down, Bear, manners. We discussed this." Garrett lunged again and managed to catch the hound this time, holding him back even as the dog's entire body wagged with excitement. "I am so sorry. He has been watching the road for the past hour, and I made the mistake of saying your name when I saw you coming." Willow laughed and knelt down, letting the hound sniff her hand. He immediately licked it, his tail beating the air like a drum. "Hello, Bear. It is very nice to meet you." "He is supposed to be intimidating and protective," Garrett said despairingly. "Instead, he loves everyone and would probably help burglars carry out my furniture if they petted him." "I think that is much better than the alternative," Willow said, scratching behind Bear's ears. The hound leaned into her touch, groaning with pleasure. "You say that now. Wait until he tries to sit in your lap during dinner." But Garrett was smiling as he said it, and when Willow stood, he ushered her inside with obvious pride. The house was exactly what she would have expected from a carpenter who took joy in his work. The main room was spacious and well lit, with large windows that would let in plenty of daylight. The furniture was simple but beautifully made, the wood oiled to a warm glow. Books lined one wall and a fire crackled in the stone hearth. It felt like a home, lived in and welcoming. "This is lovely," Willow said honestly. "Thank you. I keep meaning to add more, but I find I am content with what I have." Garrett moved to the hearth where a pot hung over the fire. "The stew should be ready. I hope you like venison. I traded some carpentry work for it last week." They sat at his table, which was set with simple pottery dishes and the bread Willow had brought. Garrett served the stew, which was thick with vegetables and herbs and tasted wonderful. Bear settled at Willow's feet, resting his head on her shoe with a contented sigh. "Tell me about your family," Garrett said as they ate. "You mentioned your mother once. Are they nearby?" "My mother lives in the northern settlements," Willow said. "She returned there after my father died about 5 years ago. She wanted me to come with her, but I had already started working at the library and I loved it here. We write letters and I visit when I can." "Was your father orc or human?" "Orc. They met when my mother came south to trade. He was a woodworker, actually. He would have liked your house." Garrett smiled at that. I would have liked to meet him. What about siblings? None. My mother had difficulty with childbirth and could not have more children after me. What about you? You mentioned a sister with children. 2 sisters, actually. Clara is the elder, married to a farmer with 3 wild boys who treat me as a combination of entertainment and climbing structure whenever I visit. Anna is younger, recently wed, no children yet, but she promises they are working on it. He grinned. They both live about 2 days' ride from here in a larger town to the south. I visit a few times a year. They talked through dinner, easy and unhurried. Garrett asked about her work at the library, and Willow found herself telling him about her favorite books, the patrons who made her laugh, the challenge of organizing a collection that served 2 different cultures with different storytelling traditions. He told her about learning carpentry from his father, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, about the house he was planning to build for a young couple on the western edge of town. When the meal was finished, Garrett suggested they take Bear for a walk, and they wandered through the settlement as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. People called greetings as they passed, and if some looked curious about seeing them together, most seemed friendly enough. It was full dark by the time Garrett walked her home to the small cottage she rented near the library. He stopped at her gate, Bear sitting patiently at his side. I had a wonderful time, Willow said. Thank you for inviting me. The pleasure was entirely mine. Would you like to do this again? Perhaps in a few days, or sooner if you prefer. I am possibly too eager and should play harder to get, but I find I cannot be bothered with games. Willow laughed softly. I like that you are honest, and yes, I would like to do this again. Soon. Garrett's smile was bright even in the darkness. Good. Excellent. Then I will see you soon, Willow Oakenshade. He squeezed her hand once, a gentle pressure, and then left with Bear trotting at his heels. Willow watched them go before letting herself inside, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. The courtship that followed was nothing like what she had experienced with Karnath. There were no formal rituals, no careful negotiations about what was appropriate or proper. Instead, there were easy dinners and long walks, conversations that stretched for hours, moments of comfortable silence. Garrett made her laugh, listened when she talked, remembered small details she mentioned in passing. He brought her tea when she worked late at the library. She helped him organize his chaotic collection of carpentry notes. They read books together, sitting by his fire while Bear snored at their feet. He taught her to identify different types of wood by sight and smell. She introduced him to orc poetry, translating the rhythmic verses as best she could into the common tongue. 2 weeks after their first dinner, Garrett kissed her for the first time. They had been walking along the creek that ran through the settlement, and he had stopped to show her where he was planning to build a small bridge for the council. The sun was setting, turning the water gold, and he had looked at her with an expression so tender it made her breath catch. "May I kiss you?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, and he did. It was gentle and sweet, his hand cupping her cheek, his lips warm against hers. When they parted, Willow felt dizzy with happiness, and Garrett's smile suggested he felt the same. But not everything was simple. 3 weeks into their courtship, Karnath appeared at the library. Willow was shelving books in the history section when she sensed someone approaching. She turned to find him standing at the end of the aisle, looking uncertain in a way she had never seen before. "Willow," he said, "may I speak with you?" She set down the books she was holding. "We are speaking now." "Privately, I meant, please." Every instinct told her to refuse, but curiosity won out. She led him to the small office at the back of the library, leaving the door open. "What do you want, Karnath?" He looked around the office, at the stacks of books waiting to be cataloged, at the ledgers where she tracked loans. "I have been thinking about what happened at the feast. Have you?" Her voice was flat. "I was too harsh. I let my pride speak instead of my heart." He met her eyes, and she could see genuine regret there. "I miss you, Willow. I miss what we had together." She stared at him, feeling nothing like what she would have expected. A month ago, hearing those words would have mattered. Now they felt strange and distant, like something from someone else's life. "You humiliated me in front of the entire settlement," she said quietly. "You made it very clear that you thought I was not good enough, that I was abandoning my heritage by being myself. What has changed? I have had time to think, to reconsider. I was wrong to judge you so harshly." He took a step closer. "We could start again. I could be more understanding, more flexible." "More flexible," Willow repeated. "About what exactly? About your work here, your human friends. I could learn to accept those things if it meant having you back." There it was. The assumption that she should be grateful for his acceptance, his flexibility, that she needed his permission to be herself. "No," Willow said simply. Karnath blinked. "No. No, I do not want to start again. I do not want your acceptance or your flexibility. I want to be with someone who thinks I am wonderful exactly as I am, who does not need to reconsider or be more understanding, because he never thought there was anything wrong with me in the first place." "The human," Karnath said, his expression hardening. "Garrett Brennan, you are with him." "Yes, and I am happy." "He is human, Willow. He will never truly understand you. Your children would be half-breeds caught between worlds. Is that what you want?" "My children," Willow said with forced calm, "are not your concern. And I am caught between worlds regardless, Karnath. I always have been. The difference is that Garrett thinks that makes me interesting instead of flawed." She walked to the door, held it open. "Thank you for coming, but my answer is no. I wish you well, but I do not want to rebuild what we had. I am building something new now, and I am happy with that choice." Karnath stood frozen for a long moment, then nodded stiffly and left without another word. Willow closed the door behind him and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She waited for regret, for doubt, but neither came. Instead, she felt only relief and a strange sort of pride. She had chosen herself, and she had chosen Garrett, and both felt right in a way that her relationship with Karnath never had. She told Garrett about the conversation that evening, and he listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. "How do you feel?" he asked when she finished. "Certain," Willow said. "I feel certain that I made the right choice." Garrett reached across the table and took her hand. "Good. Because I am quite selfishly glad you chose me, and I intend to spend a considerable amount of time proving that your certainty was well placed." "Only a considerable amount of time. Not an exceptional amount, an extraordinary amount," he corrected solemnly. "A positively excessive amount of time." She laughed and kissed him, and the matter felt settled. But Karnath, it seemed, did not agree. Over the next few weeks, he began what could only be described as a campaign. He appeared at places Willow frequented, always polite, always respectful, making small gestures that seemed designed to remind her of what they had shared. He brought her mother's favorite type of tea to the library, claiming he had acquired it in a trade. He commissioned a traditional orc carving from a northern artisan and presented it to her, saying it reminded him of stories she had told. He attended events he had previously scorned, standing where she could see him, dressed in his finest clothing. It was uncomfortable and frustrating, but Willow tried to handle it with grace. She thanked him politely for the gifts and did not encourage further contact. She mentioned to mutual friends that she was not interested in reconciliation. She made her relationship with Garrett clear to anyone who asked. Garrett, for his part, seemed unbothered by Karnath's efforts. "He is entitled to try," he said when Willow expressed frustration. "And you are entitled to refuse. I trust you, Willow. I do not feel threatened by his grand gestures." "You should feel at least slightly threatened. He is very handsome and very persistent." Garrett grinned. "Are you saying I should be making grander gestures? Because I could build you a gazebo or carve your name into a tree. I am quite good with wood. Please do not carve my name into a tree." "A small gazebo, then. Something tasteful." She swatted his arm, laughing despite her annoyance. "I do not need grand gestures. I need you to keep being yourself." "That I can do," Garrett said and kissed her forehead, but Karnath's campaign escalated. He began speaking to other orcs in the settlement, suggesting that Willow's relationship with a human was a betrayal of her heritage. He hosted a gathering in the northern style, inviting the orc families and making pointed comments about maintaining tradition. Some ignored him, but others listened, and Willow began to feel the weight of judgment from certain quarters. It came to a head one market day when Willow was buying vegetables from a human farmer she had known for years. Karnath approached with two other young orcs, both from traditional northern families. "Willow," he said, his voice carrying across the market, "we have been discussing the upcoming winter festival. The orc families are planning a traditional celebration, and we hoped you would help organize it. It has been too long since you participated in our cultural events." It was a trap, neatly laid. If she refused, she would seem to be rejecting her heritage. If she agreed, it would give Karnath access to her time and energy. "I would be happy to help," Willow said carefully. "If you provide me with a list of what needs to be done, I can contribute what time I have available." "We were hoping for more than that," one of the other orcs said. "This is important, Willow. A chance to show the humans that we maintain our traditions, that we have not lost ourselves in this mixed settlement." "I have not lost myself," Willow said, her patience fraying. "I am exactly who I have always been." "Are you?" Karnath's expression was sympathetic, but his words were pointed. "You dress like them, speak like them, court one of them. At what point do you stop being orc and become simply an imitation of something you are not?" The market had gone quiet. People were watching, listening. Willow felt heat rising in her face, familiar humiliation warring with anger. Before she could respond, a voice cut across the silence. "That is enough." Willow turned to see Garrett striding through the market, his expression harder than she had ever seen it. He stopped beside her, not touching her but making his position clear. "Willow is orc," he said flatly. "She is also a member of this settlement who contributes more to our community than most of us combined. She works at the library. She helps organize celebrations for everyone, and she has never once suggested that her heritage makes her better or worse than anyone else. If you have an issue with how she chooses to live her life, that is your problem, not hers." Karnath's expression darkened. "This is not your concern, human. It absolutely is my concern when you are harassing the woman I love in the middle of the market." Garrett's voice was level, but his eyes were fierce. "You made your feelings clear at the harvest feast. She is not interested in rekindling your relationship. Continuing to pursue her after she has said no is not romantic. It is inappropriate and unwelcome. I am not pursuing her. I am trying to help her remember who she is." "She knows exactly who she is," Garrett said. "The question is whether you will respect that or continue to make a fool of yourself." One of the other orcs stepped forward, his expression aggressive. "You do not speak to him that way." "I will speak to anyone that way if they are behaving poorly." Garrett did not back down. "And I would suggest that publicly pressuring someone to participate in cultural events as a test of their identity is manipulative and unkind, regardless of what species is doing it." Willow found her voice. "Garrett is right. I am tired of this, Karnath. I am tired of your gifts and your pointed comments and your attempts to make me feel guilty for being happy. I will help with the winter festival if you genuinely need assistance, but I will not be used as a symbol in whatever point you are trying to make about tradition versus change. You are making a mistake, Karnath said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. He will never understand you the way I do. He understands me perfectly well, Willow said, and he likes what he understands. That is all I need. She took Garrett's hand and they walked away together, leaving Karnath standing in the market with his companions. Her hands were shaking. Garrett led her to a quiet spot near the creek and pulled her into his arms. I am sorry, he murmured against her hair. I know I said I would not feel threatened, but watching him try to manipulate you made me furious. I am glad you spoke up, Willow admitted. I was about to say something much less diplomatic. You handled it beautifully. I just provided emphasis. They stood together for a long time, the sound of the creek washing away the tension. Eventually, Willow pulled back to look at him. You said you loved me, she said quietly. In the market, you said the woman you love. Garrett's eyes widened slightly. I did. I apologize if that was too soon. I was angry and it slipped out, but that does not make it less true. It is not too soon, Willow said, her heart feeling too large for her chest. Because I love you too. I have for weeks, I think, but I was afraid to say it. The smile that broke across his face was radiant. Really, really. She stood on her toes and kissed him, there in the open where anyone might see. I love you, Garrett Brennan. You are kind and funny, and you make me feel like I can be exactly who I am. I love you. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms tight around her. When they finally parted, both were smiling. We should probably discuss the fact that I just publicly declared my feelings in the middle of a confrontation, Garrett said. That was not how I planned to tell you. How did you plan it? I had this whole idea involving dinner and candles and possibly a very heartfelt speech that I had been practicing with Bear as my audience. Willow laughed. I prefer the market version. It was very dramatic. I shall remember that for future reference. When in doubt, declare love during confrontations. They walked back through the settlement hand in hand, and Willow felt something settle in her chest. Let people talk. Let Karnath make his gestures and his speeches. She knew what she wanted and she knew who she loved. The confrontation in the market seemed to mark a turning point. Word spread quickly, and the general sentiment in Greystone Crossing appeared to be that Karnath had overstepped. Several of the older orcs, including those on the settlement council, made it clear that pressuring Willow about her cultural identity was unwelcome and inappropriate. Even some of Karnath's friends began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the increasingly public nature of his pursuit. Karnath himself seemed to finally understand that his efforts were not going to succeed. He stopped appearing at places Willow frequented, stopped sending gifts, stopped making pointed comments. He remained in the settlement, but kept to himself and the small circle of orcs who still welcomed his company. Willow felt relieved and slightly sad. She had loved Karnath once, or thought she had, but what she felt for Garrett was different, deeper, more real. With Karnath, she had been trying to fit herself into a shape that pleased him. With Garrett, she could simply be. Autumn deepened into winter. The first snow fell, dusting the settlement in white. Willow helped organize the winter festival that the orc families hosted, contributing traditional foods and helping teach some of the younger orcs the songs her mother had taught her. Garrett attended, respectful and interested, asking questions and trying his hand at the traditional dances with enough enthusiasm to make up for his lack of skill. Watching him spin a young orc girl around the dance floor, his laughter bright and genuine, Willow felt her heart swell with love. He caught her eye and grinned, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. This was right. They were right. Winter settled in properly, and Garrett's carpentry work slowed as the weather turned harsh. He spent more time at the library, helping Willow with repairs and maintenance, building new shelves when the collection outgrew the old ones. They fell into an easy routine, working side by side during the day, sharing meals in the evening, stealing kisses when they thought no one was watching. Mara teased them mercilessly. "You two are sickeningly happy," she announced one morning when Willow came to buy bread with what Mara described as a ridiculous smile on her face. "It is wonderful, and I hate you both. You do not hate us. I hate that I do not have what you have. Find me a handsome carpenter who looks at me like Garrett looks at you, and then we will talk." "I shall keep my eyes open," Willow promised. That evening, she mentioned the conversation to Garrett, who laughed. "Mara deserves someone wonderful. Though I confess, I do not know any single carpenters at the moment. Most of the ones I know are married or completely unsuitable." "We will find someone," Willow said confidently. "She is lovely and funny and makes the best bread in the settlement. Some fortunate person will see that." They were sitting by the fire in Garrett's house, Bear sprawled across both their laps in a way that should have been uncomfortable but somehow was not. Outside, snow fell softly, coating the world in silence. "I have been thinking," Garrett said after a while, his tone careful, "about the future." Willow's heart beat faster. "Oh, we have been courting for nearly 3 months now. I know that is not very long by some standards, but I find that I am quite certain about how I feel, about what I want." "What do you want?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He shifted, gently moving Bear aside despite the hound's grumbles of protest, and took both of Willow's hands in his. "I want you. I want a life with you, a future. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to build things with you, argue about books with you, raise children with you if you want them. I want everything, Willow, but only if that is what you want too." Tears pricked at her eyes. "That is what I want. Exactly that. Then would you consider marrying me?" "Not today, not tomorrow, but when you are ready. When we have had time to plan properly and you have told your mother and we have sorted out all the practical details. I am not trying to rush you. I just want you to know that this is not casual for me. This is everything." "Yes," Willow said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, whenever we decide is right. Yes." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Bear barked once as if in approval before settling back down with a contented sigh. They decided to wait until spring for the wedding itself, wanting to give Willow's mother time to travel down from the north and to allow for proper preparations. But they told their friends immediately, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Mara cried and hugged them both. The librarian, an elderly human woman named Agnes, declared that she had known all along and would be delighted to host a celebration at the library. Garrett's friends clapped him on the back and teased him mercilessly. Even the settlement council offered their congratulations, pleased to see a human and an orc building a life together so openly. Not everyone was happy, of course. Some of the more traditional orcs muttered about mixed marriages and diluted bloodlines. A few humans expressed concern about the children such a union might produce. But the voices of support far outweighed the criticism, and Willow found she could ignore the rest. Karnath, she heard through mutual acquaintances, had said nothing publicly about the engagement. She wondered how he felt, whether he regretted his choices, but she did not ask. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no desire to reopen it. Winter passed slowly. The settlement hunkered down against the cold. Willow and Garrett spent their evenings planning the wedding, debating whether to include orc traditions or human ones and eventually deciding to blend both. They would exchange vows in the common tongue and in the orc language. They would serve traditional foods from both cultures. They would dance to both styles of music. "Our wedding should be like us," Garrett said. "A little bit of everything and something entirely new." Willow loved him for understanding that. In early spring, Willow's mother arrived, traveling south with a group of traders. She was a tall woman, more traditionally built than Willow, with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She embraced Willow tightly, then stepped back to look at Garrett. "So you are the human who captured my daughter's heart," she said in accented but clear common tongue. "I am," Garrett said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Though I would argue she captured mine first." Willow's mother studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Good answer. Come, let us talk. I want to know everything about the man my daughter has chosen." They spent the afternoon together, Garrett answering questions with patience and honesty. Willow's mother asked about his work, his family, his intentions, his understanding of what it meant to marry an orc woman in a world that was not always kind to such unions. Garrett answered each question directly, never trying to minimize the challenges but making it clear that he considered Willow worth any difficulty. By evening, Willow's mother had made her decision. "He is a good man," she told Willow privately. "He loves you truly. I give you my blessing, though I suspect you would have married him regardless." "I would have," Willow admitted, "but I am glad to have your approval. It matters to me." Her mother hugged her again. "You have chosen your own path, as I always knew you would. I am proud of you, my daughter. Be happy." The wedding was set for the first day of summer, when the weather would be warm and the fields green. Invitations were sent throughout the settlement and to neighboring communities. Garrett's sisters arrived a week early, their families in tow, and immediately adopted Willow as one of their own. "Finally," Clara declared. "A sister who reads. Do you know how long I have been trying to get book recommendations from Garrett? He builds beautiful furniture, but his literary taste is terrible." "It is not terrible," Garrett protested. "It is simply practical." "He reads carpentry manuals for fun," Anna said to Willow in a stage whisper. "Save yourself while you can." Willow laughed, delighted by their warmth. They helped her choose fabric for her wedding dress, offered advice on flowers, and shared embarrassing stories about Garrett's childhood that made him groan and blush. The week before the wedding, Willow was working at the library when Karnath appeared. She had not seen him in months, and the sight of him made her stiffen instinctively. "I am not here to cause trouble," he said immediately, holding up his hands. "I simply wanted to give you this before the wedding." He held out a small package wrapped in cloth. Willow took it carefully, unwrapped it to find a beautifully carved wooden box in the northern style, decorated with traditional patterns. "It is a wedding gift," Karnath said. "A tradition among our people, something old to carry into the new life." Willow ran her fingers over the carving, recognizing the skill involved. "It is beautiful, thank you. I also wanted to apologize." Karnath's voice was quiet. "For how I behaved after the feast, for trying to manipulate you, for making you feel guilty about your choices. You were right to refuse me. I was trying to force you into being someone you are not, and that was wrong." She looked up at him, searching his face for insincerity but found only genuine regret. "I appreciate that, truly." "He makes you happy," Karnath said. It was not quite a question. "He does. Very much." Karnath nodded slowly. "Then I am glad. I hope your marriage is everything you want it to be, Willow. You deserve that." He left before she could respond, and Willow was left holding the carved box and feeling an unexpected sense of closure. Whatever had been between them was truly over now, ended with grace instead of bitterness. She was grateful for that. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Willow woke early in the cottage she would be leaving behind, her mother already moving around the small space preparing tea. "Nervous?" her mother asked. "No," Willow said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I am excited." "Ready," her mother smiled. "Good, that is how it should be." Mara arrived soon after, bringing breakfast and an infectious enthusiasm that filled the cottage with laughter. They spent the morning preparing, braiding Willow's hair with summer flowers, helping her into the dress they had made together. It was a blend of styles, fitted in the human fashion but with traditional orc embroidery along the hem and sleeves. Willow felt beautiful in it, felt like herself. The ceremony was held in the field just outside the settlement, where Garrett and his friends had built a temporary pavilion decorated with flowers and ribbons. Chairs had been arranged in rows, already filling with guests from across the settlement and beyond. Humans and orcs sat together, talking and laughing, united in their joy for the couple. Garrett stood at the front beneath the pavilion, dressed in his finest clothes with his hair neatly trimmed. When Willow appeared, walking toward him with her mother at her side, his face transformed with such pure happiness that several people in the audience made soft sounds of appreciation. Willow's mother placed Willow's hand in Garrett's, whispered a blessing in the orc tongue, then stepped back to sit in the front row. The ceremony was officiated by Agnes, the librarian, who had been granted the authority by the settlement council. She spoke about love and choice, about building bridges between differences, about the courage it took to forge a new path. Then it was time for the vows. Garrett spoke first, his voice steady and clear. "Willow Oakenshade, I vow to love you in all your complexity, to honor both the orc traditions you cherish and the new ideas you embrace. I vow to build a life with you where you never have to choose between parts of yourself, where you can be everything you are without apology. I vow to make you laugh, to support your dreams, to stand beside you in joy and in challenge. I vow to be your partner, your friend, your love, for as long as we both shall live." Willow felt tears on her cheeks as she responded, first in the common tongue and then, at her mother's request, in the orc language. "Garrett Brennan, I vow to love you with all that I am. I vow to be your partner in building a home, a family, a future. I vow to cherish your kindness, to match your honesty, to dance with you even when the music is strange. I vow to choose you every day in every way for as long as I draw breath." Agnes smiled at them both. "Then by the authority vested in me by the Greystone Crossing Settlement Council and witnessed by all those gathered here, I declare you married. You may kiss." Garrett did not need to be told twice. He pulled Willow into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone watching. When they finally parted, both were grinning like fools. The celebration that followed was everything Willow had hoped for. There was music and dancing, both human and orc styles. There was food in abundance, dishes contributed by families from across the settlement. There were toasts and speeches, some funny, some touching, all sincere. Garrett's sisters cornered Willow at one point, hugging her fiercely. "Welcome to the family," Clara said. "We are very glad to have you." "And very glad Garrett finally found someone who can keep up with him," Anna added. "We were beginning to worry he would remain a bachelor forever, boring everyone with his carpentry talk." Mara presented them with a wedding cake she had spent days perfecting, decorated with sugar flowers and so delicious that people went back for seconds and thirds. Willow's mother gave a speech in the orc language that made the other orcs present laugh and cry in equal measure, though she refused to translate it for the humans present, saying only that it was a mother's blessing. As the sun began to set, The musicians struck up a waltz, and Garrett led Willow onto the dance floor. They moved together easily now, having practiced in the weeks leading up to the wedding, but it was the emotion that made it special. Garrett looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and Willow knew her expression mirrored his. "Happy," he murmured. "Extraordinarily," she said. "You, beyond measure." He spun her gently, then pulled her close again. "Thank you for choosing me, Willow Brennan." She loved the sound of her new name, loved the way it connected her to him. "Thank you for asking me to dance, Garrett, that first time at the harvest feast. Best decision I ever made," he said firmly. "Well, that and asking you to marry me, but the dance came first." "It did." She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I fell first, you know. I noticed you long before you gathered the courage to speak to me." He pulled back to look at her, surprised. "You did? Months before. I thought you were handsome and kind, and I loved watching you work. But you never seemed to notice me, and then I was with Karnath, and I tried to forget about it." "I noticed you," Garrett said softly. "I noticed everything about you. I was just trying to be honorable about it." "Clearly, I should have been less honorable and more direct." "You were perfect," Willow said. "You waited until I was ready, and then you asked me to dance. It was exactly right." They danced until the stars came out, until other couples joined them, and the field was full of swirling motion and laughter. Eventually, they slipped away, Garrett lifting Willow into his arms to carry her across the threshold of the house that was now theirs, Bear barking excitedly at their heels. Inside, the fire was already lit, and the rooms glowed with warm light. Garrett set Willow down gently, and they stood together in the quiet, the sounds of the celebration fading behind them. "Welcome home, wife," Garrett said. "Welcome home, husband," Willow replied and kissed him. The months that followed were quietly happy, filled with the ordinary joys of building a life together. Willow continued her work at the library, now walking home each evening to the house on the eastern edge of town, where Garrett would be waiting. They cooked together, read together, argued cheerfully about everything from politics to the best way to organize bookshelves. Garrett's carpentry business thrived, and Willow often helped him with the bookkeeping, her meticulous nature perfectly suited to tracking expenses and invoices. They saved carefully, planning for the future, talking about the possibility of expanding the house or starting a family. The settlement accepted them fully now. There were still occasional comments, still people who disapproved of mixed marriages, but those voices had grown quieter in the face of Garrett and Willow's obvious happiness. They became a fixture at community events, welcomed at both human and orc gatherings. Karnath eventually left Greystone Crossing, heading north to a more traditional settlement. Willow heard through her mother that he had married an orc woman from a prominent family, someone who shared his views on maintaining cultural purity. She wished him well and meant it, grateful that they had both found what they needed even if it had not been with each other. A year after their wedding, Willow discovered she was pregnant. She told Garrett one evening over dinner, simply and directly, and watched his face cycle through shock, joy, and wonder in quick succession. "A baby," he said, his voice awed. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Willow confirmed, laughing at his expression. "Are you pleased?" Pleased does not begin to cover it. He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, careful and gentle. "I am terrified and ecstatic and completely overwhelmed. When? Late winter, I think. We have time to prepare." They spent that time readying the house, building a cradle together, arguing over names. Garrett wanted traditional family names from his side. Willow wanted something that honored her mother. Eventually, they compromised on names that could work in both cultures, strong and clear. The baby came on a cold winter night, a son with green-tinted skin and his father's gray eyes. He was healthy and loud, and Garrett cried when he held him for the first time. "Hello, Brennan," Garrett whispered, using the name they had chosen. "Welcome to the world, little one." Willow watched them together, her heart full to bursting. "Brennan Oakenshade Brennan," she said softly. "It is a strong name." "He will be a strong boy," Garrett said confidently. "Look at him. Perfect." The early days of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Garrett proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor at night when Brennan fussed, changing diapers without complaint, singing nonsense songs that made Willow laugh and the baby quiet. Bear appointed himself guardian, lying beside the cradle and growling softly at anything that might disturb the sleeping child. Willow's mother came to visit and stayed for 2 months, helping with the baby and filling the house with warmth. Garrett's sisters arrived as soon as the roads cleared in spring, bearing gifts and advice and cooing over their new nephew. "He has your eyes," Clara told Garrett, "and Willow's nose. He is going to be heartbreaker when he grows up." "He is going to be a carpenter," Garrett said firmly. "Or a scholar, something respectable." "He is 3 months old," Willow said, amused. "Perhaps we should let him decide when he is older." Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before but rich with meaning. Willow returned to work at the library part-time, bringing Brennan with her when he was small enough. Garrett arranged his carpentry schedule around the baby's needs, and they navigated the challenges of parenthood together with patience and humor. 2 years later, a second son arrived, named Kieran for Garrett's grandfather. He had more human features than his brother, though his ears held a slight point that marked his Orc heritage. The boys were close from the start, Brennan delighted to have a playmate, Kieran content to follow his older brother everywhere. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Garrett built an addition, 2 bedrooms and a larger common room, and Willow planted a garden that provided vegetables through the summer. Bear, now graying around the muzzle, watched over the boys with patient devotion, allowing them to use him as a pillow and a climbing structure with equal tolerance. Greystone Crossing continued to grow around them, more families arriving each year, more houses going up, more farmland being cleared and cultivated. The library expanded again, and Willow was offered the position of head librarian when Agnes retired. She accepted with pride, knowing she could manage both her work and her family with Garrett's support. They faced challenges, of course. There were difficult winters when food was scarce and illnesses swept through the settlement. There were disagreements about how to raise the boys, about money, about priorities. But they talked through each problem, compromised when they could, stood firm when they needed to, and always came back to the love that had brought them together in the first place. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, they held a celebration at the house, inviting friends and family to mark the occasion. The boys ran wild in the garden with the other children, shrieking with laughter. The adults ate and drank and told stories, the gathering a mix of humans and orcs that would have been unthinkable in some places, but felt natural here. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Garrett found Willow standing at the edge of the garden, watching Brennan and Kieran chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "What are you thinking?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "That I am happy," Willow said simply. "That I have everything I ever wanted and more than I knew to hope for. No regrets about the orc who rejected you before the feast." She turned to look at him, smiled at the reference to how it had all begun. "Not even a little. That rejection was the best thing that could have happened, because it led to you asking me to dance." "I have never regretted that," Garrett said. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willow Brennan. You and our boys and this life we have built together." "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," he replied, and kissed her there in the garden while their children played and the stars came out overhead. 3 years later, they welcomed a daughter. Willow had hoped for a girl, and when the midwife placed the baby in her arms, she wept with joy. They named her Joanna, and she had her mother's green skin and her father's smile, a perfect blend of both her parents. The boys adored their baby sister, competing to hold her and make her laugh. Garrett built her a cradle that was a work of art, carved with patterns that honored both human and orc traditions. Willow sang her the songs her own mother had sung, lullabies in the old language that spoke of starlight and safety. As Joanna grew, she proved to be bright and curious, asking endless questions about everything she encountered. She loved books as much as Willow did, loved building things with Garrett, and had a stubborn streak that both her parents recognized and secretly admired. The family continued to expand their home and their life. Garrett's carpentry business became one of the most successful in the region, and he trained several apprentices, passing on his skills to the next generation. Willow transformed the library into a true community center, hosting readings and discussions and events that brought people together across cultural lines. Their marriage became a symbol in Greystone Crossing, proof that humans and orcs could build lasting love across difference. Young couples, both mixed and not, came to them for advice. Parents asked how they managed to honor both heritages while raising their children. Willow and Garrett always answered honestly, acknowledging the challenges but emphasizing the joy. "It is not always easy," Willow would say. "But nothing worthwhile ever is. You have to communicate, compromise, and never stop choosing each other." "And dance," Garrett would add. "Dancing helps." On their 10th anniversary, the settlement threw them a celebration in the same field where they had been married. The pavilion had been rebuilt, permanent this time, and it was decorated with flowers and lanterns just as it had been a decade before. Their children played with the other settlement children, and friends and family gathered to toast the couple who had proven that love could bridge any divide. The musicians played, and Garrett led Willow onto the dance floor just as he had at the harvest feast all those years ago. They moved together with practiced ease now, so familiar with each other that they could have danced in the dark. But the emotion was the same, the love no less intense for being worn smooth by time. "You remember the first time we danced?" Garrett asked. "Every detail," Willow said. "You saved me that night in more ways than one. You saved me too. I was a man building houses and you gave me a home." She smiled against his shoulder. "We saved each other then." "We did," he agreed. "And I would do it all again, exactly the same every time. Even the part where my ex publicly rejected me. Especially that part because it meant I got to sweep in and ask you to dance." Willow laughed, the sound bright and free. "Then I am glad for it too, for all of it, for every moment that brought us here." They danced until the music ended and the stars filled the sky. Their children came to join them, Brennan and Kieran and Joanna, and they danced as a family, circling together in the warm summer night. Friends and neighbors watched and smiled, and someone started a new song, something quick and joyful that had everyone clapping along. Later, when the celebration had wound down and they had walked home through the quiet settlement, Garrett and Willow stood together on their porch and looked out at the life they had built. The house was full of sleeping children, the garden was lush with late summer growth, and Bear was curled on his favorite rug by the door. "Thank you," Willow said quietly. "For what? For seeing me. For choosing me, for building this with me." Garrett pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "Thank you for letting me, for taking a chance on the human who asked you to dance." Best decision I ever made, she said, echoing his words from their wedding day. Mine too, he agreed. They stood together as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other across difference and built something beautiful from that finding. A marriage, a family, a life woven from two traditions into something entirely new. Inside the house, one of the children stirred and called out. Willow moved to go to them, but Garrett stopped her with a gentle hand. I'll go, he said. You rest. She watched him disappear inside, heard his voice low and soothing, heard the child settle back to sleep. When he returned, he took her hand and led her to the bench he had built on the porch years ago, where they often sat in the evenings to watch the sunset. I have been thinking, Garrett said as they settled together. About how remarkable it is that a single dance can change everything. That one moment of courage can lead to all of this. He gestured to the house, the garden, the life they had made. It was not just the dance, Willow said thoughtfully. It was everything that came after, the choice to keep choosing each other day after day, true, but the dance started it. He smiled at her in the darkness. I am very glad I worked up the courage to cross that floor. I am glad you did too. Though I confess I would have said yes if you had asked me months earlier. You should have given me a sign. I was courting someone else. What kind of sign did you expect? He laughed, pulling her closer. A fair point. I suppose the timing worked out as it should. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the settlement around them. A dog barked in the distance. Wind rustled through the trees. From somewhere, nearby came the sound of voices, neighbors talking on their own porch. You ever wonder what would have happened if Karnath had not rejected you that night? Garrett asked eventually. If he had asked you to dance instead? Willow considered the question seriously. I think I would have danced with him because I still cared for him then. But I do not think it would have changed the outcome. We were wrong for each other in fundamental ways. Eventually, I would have realized that and ended it anyway. So you and I would have found each other eventually. I like to think so. We worked in the same small settlement. We had mutual friends. You came to the library regularly. I suspect we would have collided somehow, whether at the feast or somewhere else. I prefer the dance, Garrett said firmly. It was much more romantic than, say, bumping into each other at the market. Everything is more romantic in retrospect. Not true. I thought you were beautiful and brave and worth any risk even in that moment. That has not changed with time, only deepened. Willow turned to kiss him, slow and sweet. You have always had a gift for saying exactly the right thing. I have had excellent motivation. Making you smile is my favorite thing. A light appeared in one of the bedroom windows. Kieran, probably, unable to sleep. Willow sighed. I should go check on them. We both should. Family is a joint endeavor. They went inside together, found Kieran sitting up in bed with tears on his face from a nightmare. Garrett scooped him up while Willow fetched water, and together they soothed him back to calm. By the time they tucked him in again, he was smiling sleepily. Reassured by their presence, in Joanna's room, they found Brennan had climbed into his sister's bed. The two children curled together like puppies. Willow adjusted the blanket over them both, her heart tender at the sight. They love each other so much, she whispered. Like their parents, Garrett said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. They checked on Bear, who thumped his tail without lifting his head, then finally made their way to their own room. Willow changed into her nightclothes while Garrett banked the fire, and they climbed into the bed they had shared for 10 years. Long day, Garrett said, pulling her close. Good day, though. The best. But then most days with you are good. Even the difficult ones, especially those. We get through them together, and that makes them worthwhile. Willow settled against him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the settlement slept. Inside, their family was safe and warm. This was home, she thought. This feeling of complete belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be. "Garrett," she said softly, "thank you for asking me to dance." She felt him smile against her hair. "Any time, love, any time at all." They drifted to sleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the life they had built from a single moment of courage on a harvest night years before. A dance that had become a courtship that had become a marriage that had become a family and a future neither of them could have imagined but both were grateful to have found. The story of the orc woman rejected before the feast, and the human man who asked her to dance, became legend in Greystone Crossing, told to children as an example of kindness and courage, repeated at weddings as a reminder that love could come from unexpected places. But for Willow and Garrett, it was simply their beginning, the first chapter in a story that continued to unfold with each passing day. They had chosen each other across difference and despite difficulty. They had built a life that honored both their heritages while creating something entirely new. They had raised children who moved easily between worlds, comfortable in their mixed heritage. They had proven that love was stronger than prejudice, that connection could bridge any divide. And it all started with a dance, on a night when one person was brave enough to reach out, and another was brave enough to take his hand. Everything else followed from that single moment of choice, spinning out into a future full of joy and challenge, and the deep satisfaction of being truly known by another person. In the darkness of their bedroom, Garrett tightened his arms around Willow, and she shifted closer in her sleep. Outside, stars wheeled overhead and the settlement dreamed. Inside, a family rested secure in the knowledge that they were loved and chosen, today and always. And somewhere in the distance, music played on, waiting for the next dance, the next story, the next two people brave enough to reach across difference and choose love instead of fear. That was how the world changed, Willow thought drowsily. One dance at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage that rippled out into everything that came after. She fell asleep smiling, wrapped in warmth and gratitude, already looking forward to whatever came next in the story they were writing together, one day at a time, one dance at a time, for the rest of their lives.